Hi. Can you hear me? Hi, Patty. Um,
Hi, Candy. How are you?
good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so good to see you, Patty. You're brand new. How have your meetings been going? Oh, you haven't had an appointment yet, right? Oh, you're muted.
Let me make sure that I have my camera working.
Yeah.
I have a hard time with my
I like
eyes,
how.
my
Oh,
glasses, and everything. All the combination of equipment that has to be in the right place.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like how your background looks like an office.
I know. Oh,
That's
we can try
great.
Austin, Texas. What
Oh,
about Austin?
nice.
That's nice, right? Austin
Yeah.
is nice. I think I have to update my Zoom to get the blur background
Mm,
that is being so used lately.
yeah. Yeah.
I have a clock, but the time does not go.
Oh my God, that's so good. Well, we did a happy hour where we had a comedian perform,
Mhm.
and so I used this background uh, for that event. It was fun.
Oh, the stage.
See
That's
him
so
on stage.
cool. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah. Hi, Karen.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's
Excellent. Thank
great
you for
here.
being here.
And Rachel, I wish I could see you, but I understand if you don't want to show your camera. I haven't seen you in ages, and you're muted. So,
Been a while. It has been a while.
yeah, I saw Maida at the Little Black Dress event on last Saturday. So,
Yeah. Awesome. I know her and Daniel went. They said it was a good time. So
oh, good, good. Yeah, it was fun seeing them in person. So we have 19 people registered for this session, Dr. Milky, and then um, this is not a beer; it's just a water. And it's not quite time for that yet. And then 36 on registered for Friday.
Friday lunch.
Oh,
Excellent.
Yeah.
And then it's spring break.
Yes. And then it's spring break. Well, I'll still be working, but
I'm
some
not.
parents.
I'm going to go to the mountains. We're driving to the mountains. Let's see.
Oh, where are you going to? New
To
Mexico?
Colorado. We're gonna drive.
Colorado.
Yeah. I don't ski at all. I'm not a skier. I'm from
Yeah.
Mexico. I
Right.
don't ski. But my kid and my husband, they do. So they're gonna go on.
That's great.
Spend some time outside after being inside the house for such a long time. So it'll be good. It'll
Yeah.
be good.
That'll be fun. You should try to ski if you well, I'm a terrible skier. I've been skiing for I think maybe 10 to 12 years and I've never improved. I never get better.
Well, the first time we went, I thought about taking classes, but I saw the beginners and I'm like, this looks very extremely difficult. And I'm just not going to put myself into
Yeah.
that. So I said no. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you can go to like a spa or shopping or
Or work. I know, right?
or
Or a little
work.
bit of
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So who else is here? Adrian,
Yeah.
Adrian,
Let's
right?
see.
How do you pronounce?
Adrian. Yeah, hi.
Yeah,
Hi,
thank you.
Adrian.
Hey, Adrian.
I'll have to see. Yeah. So far we only have this. Here we go. There's Venus.
That's my colleague.
Yeah. And we'll give it like hi Venus.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi. We'll give it like maybe 5 minutes and then we'll just start because
Beautiful.
we do have the other session. So if someone registered for this one and can't make it, then they can join the next one.
The next one.
That's fine.
Patricia, I love your necklace.
Oh, thank you. My friend Joni has a company called Pono out of New York,
Oh,
and she does some really creative things. So, but thank you.
Oh, it looks very nice.
Thank you.
really cool. Yeah, good. So what else is going on? I'm one of those people like I have to fill silence. There's Janet. Hi, Janet. Good to see you.
I think she's on mute, Janet. Yeah.
Yes, that's still the phrase for 2021
know,
as it was
right?
for 2020.
I know.
We don't
Yeah.
learn.
Yeah, I saw a funny like internet meme the other day that was like, we're just gonna let March come back and act like it didn't try to kill us last year.
Right?
Yeah, so far March 2021 isn't that different from March 2020.
Mm-hmm.
February for sure. Valentine's Day is going to have a new meaning for those in Texas.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, it's tough. Let's see.
On that March 13, that's the day when everything closed. So it's coming.
Mhm.
Saturday. So it'll be a nice anniversary.
Yeah, I will not be celebrating.
No, but we won't forget that date.
It's true. Yeah.
Commemorating.
Mm-hmm.
Has anyone got their vaccine yet? Their first or second, or Karen did?
First
Good.
one.
Oh, good. Yeah, I got my first one. I'm 1B, so I got my first one. Gosh, in February 24th, I think.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Yep.
It's coming. They're coming.
Right.
I have
Soon.
a lot of faith that are coming for all of us. I think we are
Mm-hmm.
visualizing everyone getting vaccine. So
Yes,
all
that's
my
good.
power on that. We need that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Janet, I like your calendar with the little pig.
Oh, yeah.
It's really cute.
It's cute.
Yeah. So, and this is the other Dress for Success Awesome that has just joined. That's Amanda Miller. She's our program manager.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was just
Hello.
changing my name.
Yeah, that looks good. Okay. Yeah, we still haven't figured out how to share a Zoom account. Being a poor nonprofit, we don't have a lot of money, so we have to like share it.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's working. Well, I guess what we can do is we'll just go ahead and get started, and then people that want to join can join as they come in, because I don't want us all just sitting here and waiting. So so I just want to do like a quick introduction for Venus and Alejandra, and talk a little bit about why we're here today, and then you guys can just take over. Sound good? Yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, good. Yeah. So really the reason why I wanted to do this is because as volunteers at Dress for Success, and so many of you know that we serve women from vulnerable and marginalized communities. They're often experiencing complex challenges, right, related to racism, poverty. They might be experiencing homelessness, mental health issues. They might be involved with the criminal justice system, or have experienced intimate partner violence. And so I really do want to create a more equitable and inclusive space, not only for the women that we serve, but for you as well. We always say that volunteers are the heartbeat at Dress for Success. And as such, I really do want to acknowledge all of you and thank all of you for attending today. I also want to thank you and acknowledge your value, your skills, your abilities, and thank you for collaborating with us. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce our leaders for today. First, Dr. Milky Alejandra. She has more than 20 years experience as a diversity, equity, and inclusion coach And Venus is the founder of Vector U. And if you guys want, you can put your links in the chat if anyone wants to look you up. And she has also has over 18 years experience in DEI coaching and mediation. So welcome, ladies, and thank you for hosting this with us. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. And then I'll mute.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here with everyone.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. Hopefully technology will collaborate today. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes. Can see it.
Awesome. All right. Well, the first thing we wanted to talk about is inclusion. And what do we mean by inclusion? We talk a lot about this in this world, especially related to diversity and equity, like Candy just mentioned. We say things like, we need to be more inclusive, or how inclusive are our hiring practices? Are we using inclusive languages? And businesses, nonprofits, corporations have all identified now that inclusive practices are critical to their success. But I think it's important to really, truly understand what is inclusion. What does it mean? So there's a very large component of intentionality with inclusion. It is making a deliberate choice to accept all individuals in a place where the differences are valued and even expected, whether it is race, language, national origin, religion, or any other aspect that creates the identity of someone. Now, talking about today, well, 2020 needs no introduction. It was a year of intense change, but also new awarenesses. Awareness of the current state of the communities that we live in, and also a year of developing some aspirational goals. Who do we want to be as individuals? Who do we want to be as a society? So in 2021, a diverse organization is going to benefit by increased profitability, increased creativity, increased ability to solve difficult problems. And in addition to that, in the case of nonprofit organizations like Dress for Success, being an inclusive organization will improve the branding in the community and better serve our diverse customers. So for individuals, inclusive environments are going to result in inspired engagement and increased collaboration, which is so important. Research has revealed that when people feel that they are treated fairly and that their uniqueness is appreciated, they have a sense of belonging. And when they have a sense of belonging, they feel included. And when they feel included, they can be more present, more authentic, and more fully engaged in pursuing their professional and personal dreams. So let's talk about inclusive volunteerism. Now that we know what inclusion is and why it's important, this can be applied to the clients that you serve at Dress for Success. When we talk about inclusive volunteerism, we think about practices that make everyone feel included, regardless of the differences that might exist. An inclusive volunteer understands that a lot of the success of Dress for Success comes when clients feel included and valued. And most importantly, inclusive volunteerism doesn't just happen automatically. Like I said, you need to be deliberate about it. This is always bolstered by the exposure to diverse people in situations that can challenge preconceived notions. And it can be accelerated through explicit and conscious learning. And that is what we're doing here today. So in the case of Dress of Success, we want to think about the why. Why is it important to be inclusive? So we rely at Dress for Success very heavily on the volunteers and the work that you do. And most importantly, these practices will benefit the clients that we serve. Another important reason to learn how to be inclusive volunteers is the understanding that there can always be a perceived power differential between our volunteers and our clients, where volunteers might have more time or money or resources or opportunities, And the impact that we want to drive with our clients is going to come from making sure that our clients feel unique and as resourceful and self-empowered individuals. And as volunteers, we have this power to elevate our clients in the way that we express our beliefs. And we also could have, unbeknownst to us, a negative effect on our clients. So all of you are volunteering selflessly and giving back to the community, and just understanding that being inclusive is going to be very important to know that the intention and the impact could be different. So understanding the impact that we could have as volunteers is very critical.
Yeah, so now let's talk a little bit about cultural competence or competency. And what we're trying to do today is trying to talk to you and me. I'm a volunteer with you with differences as well. So talk to volunteers about these ways to ensure that we are inclusive with the clients that we work with, right? And Venus talked about a little bit about what we mean with that phrase inclusive volunteerism, and just make sure that we have these practices in place to make sure that we treat every single of our clients in a way that makes it feel that they belong to the organization, that they are heard, that they're valued, they are seen. So one of the key concepts that is always very good to keep in mind when we talk about this kind of context is cultural competence, or competency, as sometimes it's called. So nowadays, we all know nowadays, every single organization is gonna have different cultures. And by cultures, I'm not only talking about the Mexican culture or the US culture or the French culture. I'm talking about just different groups. Can be different ethnic groups, can be different groups based on religion or many other things, right? So there in any organization nowadays, we're gonna have all these different cultures that are in contact. So when we have all these different cultures in contact, there is a need for us to be culturally competent. Like it says there on the slide, an inclusive volunteer, the ones that we are, inclusive volunteers is a culturally competent volunteer. So what do I mean by that? So when we are culturally competent, we have developed this skill or the ability to work effectively across cultures when there are different cultures present in a way that acknowledge and respects the culture of the person being served, right? And cultural competency was a concept that kind of was born in the healthcare industry because they realized that they wanted doctors and nurses and people in the healthcare industry to treat diverse customers, right? Or patients who were not part of the same culture with respect, in a proper way. So when we talk about cultural competency, it's all those behaviors, that ability to work across cultures in an effective way, in a way that acknowledges and respects the other person's culture. So how do we do this? One of the things that we do, and that you'll hear this a lot today, is through self-awareness. That is the first step. Always making sure that we take time, that we slow down in our daily interactions, in what we're thinking, what we're doing, slow down and become aware of our own cultural worldview. We all have a certain way to see the world, a certain way to see what happens, actions, activities, people, things. And that way to see the world is according to our culture. So knowing that we see the world, how we see the world, the way that we see the world is just as important as knowing that others view the world differently based on their own perspectives and based on their own views, right? We, Alejandra and Venus and Rachel and everyone else, we view the world through lenses of according to our age, our gender, our religion, our race, where we grew up, all these different ways that kind of shape how we see the world. And everyone has a different way to see the world, right? So that concept is it's important to understand that the way we see the world is only our way. So that is what we're talking about self-awareness. When we talk about self-awareness, also means to be reflective, self-reflective practice through which we ponder and question on our thoughts and our behaviors in regards to other people. Why am I acting this way? Why do I have this feeling? Why do I have that? Right? So I question that, that's self-awareness. Through that self-awareness, we can learn how to be ready to acknowledge, to validate, to respect other cultures, because we now understand that no culture is superior over another. There's not one single way of doing things or the way of doing things. No culture is superior over another. When we can develop this skill, we have the ability to build trustworthy relationships, right, between people of different cultures. And trustworthy relationship is the base for any organization to succeed. We need those to be in place. And the other point about a cultural competency, and one that I want you to keep in mind, is that it's a never-ending process. We are continually learning about other cultures. We're continually learning about other people. We're continually learning and questioning and pondering our thoughts and beliefs, always thinking, those are mine. That's the way that I see the world. That's the way that I think about everything that I see around me, but it's only my way. And people might have or will have very different ways of seeing the world, okay? So an inclusive volunteer, if we go to the next slide, an inclusive volunteer, like the ones that, like we are, have like three main engines moving this, right? Or three main components or characteristics. We talk about motivation. We know we have a drive to learn about other cultures and other ways of being and doing, because we know that inclusive organizations thrive. They are more effective, they're more efficient. So we have that motivation to keep learning about other cultures. We also know that inclusive volunteers, they want to know, they want to learn, they have knowledge, they understand the different cultural norms, practices, and conventions, right? And they understand how the ones that we have impact our biases and our behaviors. So we have knowledge, we understand that there are different ways, we understand about other cultures, and we understand that they, like I said, and I'm gonna repeat myself, that there are different ways of doing things. So we have that knowledge, we understand that. And because we understand that, we can adapt. We have adaptability. We understand that different cultural situations may require adaptations in the way we interact with others. So we have motivation to keep learning, we acquire the knowledge, and we adapt our behaviors to meet the expectations of having different cultures together. Now we go to the next slide. So that was cultural competence. Now, another very important way to be an inclusive volunteer, and we're going to talk a lot about this, is to be cognizant of our biases. We said how we have our own culture and that shapes the way we see the world, right? Our own culture and those beliefs and those views also has a way of creating biases in how we act, right? So the number one thing that to be an inclusive volunteer is to be cognizant of biases, especially of biases that are unconscious, that we don't know that we have them. So what are unconscious biases and why do we have them? I will talk about that. But I'm gonna give you a little example of unconscious bias that we all have, and we'll repeat that a little bit, but a couple of before the pandemic, a year before the pandemic, I was driving home at 11 o'clock in the morning, and there was, I live in a residential area, so more or less central Austin, here in Austin, and 11 o'clock in the morning, and there are some teenagers in a skateboard, right, on the street, down the street. My first reaction was, what are these kids doing on the street? Why they are not in school? That was my first reaction. So what was in play in that reaction? My biases, my unconscious bias that came to the surface like this in like less than 1 second, because my belief, the way I see the world, is that kids who are 13 or 14 on a Tuesday morning, they should be in school and not in a skateboard down the street. I cut myself because of course, I should cut myself, and this is what I do. So I cut myself, and I remember what's important is not my first thought, it's my second thought and my first action. So my second thought was like, hey, they can be visiting grandma from out of state. They can be helping, they can be in some kind of cultural trip or service, I don't know, excursion or something, many things. But that's how the implicit bias work. They're sneaky, and we'll talk more about that. Now, when we understand our conscious biases, when we are prepared for those kind of thoughts that come to our mind so quickly, when we understand that the origin of those and how they operate, then we're going to be able to adapt our behaviors. And instead of me judging and instead of me questioning those kids, I was able to say like, no, there might be something else going on. Who knows? But something else, instead of judging and saying, what are those kids doing not in school at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning? So we're going to go and talk a little bit more about that.
Excellent. So before we move forward, we wanted to share a little bit of the biological basis for our biases. This behavior has served in our evolution, and it comes from the way that our brain works. We are constantly exposed to so much information from the environment, from our interactions, and our brains have evolved to filter out all the information that is not relevant to the task at hand. So out of the 11 million bits of information that we get in every minute, we're only aware of about 40. So that's a really small fraction of the information that we know that we're receiving. So how do we make sense of the full picture if we're only processing and being aware of these small bits of information that are coming to us through our senses? Well, our brain takes shortcuts. And the way that it takes shortcuts is that it creates categories. And these categories tend to have generalizations. So we put an object in a category, and then we give it a lot of the other information or characteristics that the rest of the objects had in that category. So I want to show you something. If you look at these two tables that are shown on the screen, would you say that the two tables are of the same size, the surface, or would you say they're different? Just curious if you can put in the chat. So as you put in the chat whether you think they're the same or different, I am going to show you a little video. So my apologies. Somehow I ended up in mute. Yay, technology. Okay, so take a look at these two tables. Wow, they are the exact same size. So what is really interesting is that even after we know that these two tables are the same size, our brain doesn't really want to believe it. We're like, no. When you add the different characteristics, in this case, the legs and the positioning, you're absolutely confirmed or certain that these two tables are different size. So this is what our brain is doing. It is filling in a lot of that information that we are not conscious about. And it takes sometimes even more than facts to dispel what our brains are filling in. So talking a little bit about categorization. So again, once we see an idea or an object, we organize that knowledge into these categories, sharing the same attributes. And that is actually a good thing, Because if we had to process every piece of information individually, we would go into cognitive overload. We would not be able to put all that information together and make sense of it. So in order to function effectively, we have created the basis of what Alejandra was just mentioning in our implicit bias.
Okay, so these categorizations, the one that Venus was talking about, that that need, and the human brain is always trying to categorize things. It's a way that the brain is trying to simplify life, a way that is trying to say, okay, this makes sense if I put it in this box, and this makes sense if I put it in this box, like in my example of the kids in the skateboard on the street. For me, the box for kids, 14-year-olds, is in school. Kids go to school on Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. That's how my brain categorizes things, right? That's how my brain tries to simplify life, to understand the context, understand the world. So let's start putting things in boxes, categorization, like Dennis was talking about. That categorization is the basis for the stereotypes. Stereotypes is when we associate a set of traits, all physical traits, behavioral traits, all kinds of traits, different characteristics with a social group. And that social group can be based on political affiliation, national origin, religion, whatever. So our brain is constantly trying to like, okay, this goes in this box, this goes in here, and it does the same thing with different groups of people, right? However, that's what the brain is trying to do unconsciously. But those stereotypes are unreliable generalizations. They are too good of a too good of a good thing. There are categorizations that have gone a little bit too far, because we cannot rely on those, because we know that human beings, even when they belong to certain groups, are different and they have unique characteristics. They're unique individuals. So one thing that I'm going to say related to what I said before, the cultural competency, there's a very fine balance between understanding different cultures and learning about different cultures, and thinking that just because you belong to that culture, you must be like that because I learned that culture X, to give an example, has this, and this. So that is a tricky thing. That's have to be very careful. We understand that the different ways of being and seeing and the culture, but we also know that stereotypes are an unreliable generalizations that we cannot make, right? So these stereotypes are usually, they don't recognize individual differences. They're usually binary, either or absolute, all or none. I had a friend of mine who was always making fun of us, and he would tell that to me as a Latina. That's how you Latina women are all like, always, or never. And of course, it was kind of a joke, and we were very good friends, and that's okay. But of course, there's a lot of these stereotypes that are present in our lives all the time. So they are not a complex, sophisticated description of people. They are these generalizations. Now, these stereotypes, they're acquired, and it says on the slide, through cultural osmosis. We absorb them through media, through folklore, through stories. We don't even notice but we absorb them all the time. They're with us all the time. They're so ingrained. We learn them so effortlessly that we don't even notice that we have them. Again, self-awareness. We go back to be reflective and to be aware of what we believe and think, right? So we acquire them without even thinking, but they take a special effort to discount. It takes an intentionality, like Venus said at the beginning, and to be very deliberate in like, no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna use those stereotypes. I'm not going to use those generalizations because I am more knowledgeable and I'm an inclusive volunteer and I know what I'm doing, right? So they're very hard to pin, they're very hard to identify because we usually say or talk about them without really bad feelings about them, right? It's just part of life, part of everything that kind of surround us, right? And we forgot to say, we're going to have some time for question and answers at the end. So if you have a question, so write it down so we can discuss it at the end. If we go to the next slide. So there are some examples of stereotypes. Some of them are negative, right? Though some of them are there. Like women are bike drivers or engineers are inflexible. Some of them might be considered more neutral, right? If there's neutral, like leader, usually a man, or they can be both, right? Sometimes Americans have the stereotypes in other parts of the world that some of them are positive and some of them are negative, right? We all have those stereotypes and we sometimes all suffer from those stereotypes, right? There are both ways. We have them and then people have them on about us. And that's also part of this brain that we have that has tried to categorize people all the time, right? If we go to the next one. So then we have learned, so we have this brain that creates these categories. We're always trying to put things in categories, right? And that has created stereotypes that we have about other groups of people that are present in the world, that are shared through media, movies, books, everything. And those stereotypes are the foundation of all biases, of those unconscious biases that we have. And we're going to be talking about next.
So biases, we've gone through, again, like Alejandra said, how our brain creates categories, how these result in stereotypes, and then we end up with biases. A bias is a preference that can be for or against something. For instance, I have a bias towards bananas. I just smell bananas. I don't even know what it is. It can be a candy, it can be a cake, it can be a cookie, or it can just be a room that smells like banana. And I'm already going to feel positive because I just love bananas. So they can be just a preference towards something, but it can also be a preference against something. You know, using the same analogy of food, licorice. I absolutely hate licorice. And I go into a place that smells like licorice and I'm already in a bad mood. I'm like, get away, I must run. There's something wrong here. So there's all these different associations that I have with licorice, and God forbid somebody tries to give me something to drink that has licorice in it, because I will be very upset. So these are just preferences that I have. And some of our biases might be very explicit, like I just mentioned. I have known biases for and against things, but some of our biases are not explicit. They operate outside of our conscious mind. So these are also called implicit or unconscious biases. For example, in this context, we can say that we believe in equity and inclusion, but might actually behave in ways that could be biased or discriminatory. And that might be something that we're not aware of at all. So implicit biases are with us. They are with all of us. We are all biased. And it is neither good nor bad as long as we understand that we have those biases there. So we can be very specific about doing things to counteract these biases that we have, first by surfacing them, and then by doing things and taking action. We're going to talk about a couple of things that can make us aware of our biases and how to become more inclusive as volunteers. Some of the questions that come across very quickly as we encounter people and that we don't even know that we're asking ourselves are, should I be friends with this person? Should I open the door to this stranger? Should I invite this person in? What kinds of books should I suggest to this group? So there are all sorts of questions that sort of go on unnoticed, and our biases lead us to make a decision. And I'm going to show a picture now that Alejandra and I were laughing about earlier. I put IRL, and we were laughing about it because my 9-year-old daughter taught me this concept recently. I was like, what does IRL mean? Well, apparently it means in real life.
And I just learned that today, this morning. And
I Alejandra, I saved you from your son looking at you with the same face that my daughter gave me. Like, you're so uncool, Mom. So this is a picture of what happens in real life. We meet somebody on the street and we have a mental checklist of all the characteristics that we are seeing from that person. Remember, 40 million bits of information per minute. And within fractions of a second, we make assessments. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it safe? Is it risky? So in the time that it takes these two people to encounter each other, both have already gone through a risk assessment. Okay, is he male, female, black, white? What does it mean that they have the particular clothing? What about their physical behavior? Are they whistling? Are they singing? Do they have headphones on? So all of these different things that might appear to be completely neutral characteristics have associations related to them. And in a fraction of a second, our brain has gone through all of this and weighed, is this a person that I am safe around? Is this somebody that I want to invite into my house? Is this somebody I like as a friend, or somebody that I don't like? I don't know how many times you've had that gut feeling the moment you see somebody in Zoom, like, okay, I'm tuning out. I do not like them. It could be the Eiffel Tower in the background, or the picture that they have, or the way that they are expressing themselves. But all of this happens in real life really, really quickly. So I will let Alejandra talk a little bit more about this.
So I want to see if there are any questions about implicit biases and how, I mean, we went through see how they originate, right? Through our stereotypes, through our brain's desire to categorize things in boxes and keep everything neat and simple. So are there any questions so far about biases or implicit biases and how they show up? They're sneaky. Remember my example of the kids in the skateboard? And they're sneaky. And even me with this background DI for such a long time, I caught myself judging those kids and say, what are those kids doing outside out of a school? Any questions or comments so far?
I had a comment about the image that Venus just showed that was interesting to me, was that the risk and the mitigating factors were different by person, right? So when you're encountering this person on the street, one of the risk factors was police officer, while on the other side, the risk factors included other things. And so I think when we talk about adaptability and not being rigid in our thinking or behavior, that we're realizing when we're encountering someone else, those factors are different for them than they are for us.
Mm-hmm.
Great point.
Definitely. Because remember, that was the one point that we said, that I said at the very beginning, our way to see the world is just our way, right? The way that we see is just our way. In my dissertation years ago, one of the girls that I follow as a case study was this very smart girl who had just been offered a spot in a prestigious magnet school. And she and her mother decided not to take that spot in a middle school. And I just could not believe my ears when they told me, why are you saying no to this fantastic opportunity to go to this magnet school? And it was part of my research to understand that everyone, and I hate to repeat myself, see life in a different way. For that family, going to that magnet school will require many other sacrifices, or will require many challenges that they were not willing to take or accept. And for them, the best decision was to say no to that magnet school. And even that for me was like, me again, from my perspective of being an educator, of having that much um, faith in schooling and education, for me, it was through those lenses, was like, how can you not take that? But for them, it made all sense not to take it. So always self-awareness, always checking our assumptions, always questioning our assumptions. Why am I thinking this way? Why? What about me? Who am I? And how does that make me think and believe about things that I see or events that I see outside in the world? So when we understand implicit bias, right, we begins with understanding yourself. And I feel like I'm saying this idea like 110 times, but understand yourself, get to know yourself, right? When we know our biases, then we can stop them. Before that, we don't know what we are biased for or against, then we cannot stop. We don't have that power over them. But when we know them, we can stop them. Recognize that your values are your values and learn about your ways of being, doing, and thinking, and therefore be more aware of your biases. Okay. So this is I had, there are some questions, for example, there are some questions like, again, everything that comes is like, if you could have this question for you, and it's not on the slide, but if you want to write it, I can put it in the chat. What about this thought? Whatever I'm having, whatever is coming to my mind, what about this thought is a generalization? What about this thought that the kids should be in school on a Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. is a generalization? Well, everything, because who says that? Why? There are many other options. There are many other alternatives. There are many other possibilities. So always questioning and kind of like, what's going on in with my thinking? What about this thought is a generalization? That's a reflection that we can make. What is another thought? How can I see this differently? What's another thought that can come to my mind? What is making me think this way? And I can put the questions in the chat in a little bit. What is making me think this way? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I thinking that he should behave this way? Or why am I thinking that this girl should go to that magnet school? What am I thinking about that? Why? What is making me think that way? And how can I reframe my thinking? Okay, how can I think about differently? How can I think about differently? Okay. So that's, and I put the questions there for you can, so you can have those questions to kind of reflect on whatever. And it always happens. I don't think there goes any day when we don't have like, oh, why is this going on? Why is like that? Why is having that reaction? Why are you saying this thing? So having those questions allow us to kind of reflect and reframe our thinking. Now, also part of inclusive volunteering is to learn, right? And Venus and we are continually learning. I mean, I moved from Mexico to the US in the year 2000. So I consider myself still a foreigner, even though I've been here for 20 years and I'm a US citizen now. But I still learn about the US culture and I still learn about what things are okay and what things might be offensive to some people. So there are some things here that we have learned not to say, and there's a ways that you can adapt your behavior, adapt the way you use language, right? Or adapt to make sure that we are not offensive to other groups, right? For example, there are, and some of these have been told to me, and some of things I have heard or we have heard, right? But making sure that we do not use generalizations. Instead, that we see individuals as unique. Like, don't stereotype individual, and please somebody give me the verb, see people as individuals, right? Like, why don't you on the group, why don't you Mexicans stop doing that? I mean, we're not gonna put everything in one group, right? Oh, you don't act like them. Do you eat a lot of, I've been told many times, do you eat a lot of tamales in Christmas? And no, not all Mexicans eat tamales for Christmas. So things like that, that we do not use to kind of put everyone together in one single group, because we want to look at the individual as unique, as perfect as they are, but as a unique individual. Now, physical characteristics. We don't say anything related to body or physical characteristics. Nothing about your hair. Is that your real hair? Or may I touch your hair? We don't say anything about that because it's a physical characteristic that is not very likely relevant to anything that we are talking about. Skin color, you're not white, or what are you, right? And there's one there that it's a toasted marshmallow. And I'll be honest to tell you that somebody told that to me referring to my kid, and I'm married to a white man, an American, and in the conversation about whatever, and they're good friends, so they were not trying to harm me. It was just an observation, and they called him a toasted marshmallow, kind of tan on the outside and white inside. We don't make comments about that. We do not make comments about that because there was one thing about intention and impact. The intention might not be to offend or to attack me, but the impact was very large and it was very hurtful, right? So we don't make any comments about body, nothing. Nothing. And one thing, cultural difference in Mexico, I mean, we always say, oh, you've lost weight? And I mean, it's way more common here. And here we just don't do anything about body. Language. Language is a very personal thing. The way we use language is so personal to every single individual. It shows about who we are. It's the way that we express our ideas, ourselves to the world. So we also do not make any comments about language. You don't sound black over the phone or things like that, like imitating an accent, or do you speak Spanish just because he looks Latin, right? Or a very famous one, you're so articulate. We don't say anything like that because we're assuming that, oh, people that look like you are not usually articulate, but you are. So I have to give it to you like, oh, look at you. Even though you are this, you are so articulate, right? So mother, we go to the next one. So deeply personal experiences, things that are very, very personal. We don't make comments to that, right? Like, when did you arrive to this country? To people who come from, who look different, or to vets, to veterans. Have you ever killed someone? We're not going to make any kind of comments like that because that's very deep, very, very personal, right? Or normalizing negative assumptions as truth. Of course, you will get this because you have the diversity card or you have the diversity advantage, or why are you so angry? And sometimes we are, again, the intention is not to offend or to attack, but the impact can be very harmful. So even though we are not trying to do that, we all have to make sure that we learn things that cannot be said, right? And using culturally important terms in ways that where we are appropriating culture from another groups to use them in our own communication for fun, or just kind of like when they are not part of our heritage, right? So.
Okay, so we go into another practice which Alejandra has already been touching a lot about, and that is self-awareness. What does self-awareness mean, and how do you become more self-aware? Well, the first thing is the mantra, know thyself, right? So knowing how you see yourself, what makes you who you are, what creates your identity, how do you relate to the world, what characteristics define you. All of these things are important for you to know who you are, which then in turn will make it easier for you to relate to other people that are different than you, that see the world in a different way, that have other identities than you do. The second part is examining your values. So do you take a look at how you're behaving and what some underlying assumptions are that are coming into play? What are those values that are so important to you? examining them is always a really good thing, because like we've been talking about, a lot of these categorizations and biases, they're very unconscious. But if you take the time to reflect and you look at your values, you're really going to be able to surface what are those things that might be flavoring or coloring the way you interact with others. And another very important thing is reflecting on your actions. So do you think about the impact of your words and the impact of your actions on other people before you do them, before you speak those words? This is so important to always have in the back of your mind. Like Alejandra said earlier, what's important is not your first thought, but your second thought and your first action. I think that's how it went. So you can definitely have a proclivity or an inclination to think something, but challenge that thought. And before you speak or before you act, make sure that you think about that impact on the other person. And then finally, I wanted to introduce the implicit association test. There are, I think, a few tests out there. This one in particular was created by 3 professors, one of them from Harvard. And what they did was create a test that can give you greater insight into your beliefs, your unconscious beliefs. So this was created by something called the Project Implicit. And the objective of this test was to surface the strength of the associations between concepts such as Black people or gay people or old people or any other set of groups, and the evaluations like good and bad. So you can take different kinds of tests in Project Implicit and take them with a grain of salt. Maybe you will take one of these tests for age and be surprised by what it is telling you, that you have a strong preference for younger people. You might not be aware of that preference. Or it may be very like, duh, of course, I know that I grew up in an environment where I have a preference towards, more positive associations with males, for instance. So there's something interesting to look at that. It is not a foolproof approach, and there's always going to be controversy, but we're giving you some tools if you want to engage in further self-reflection. And some other additional recommendations is to expose yourself to stereotypes. This is really interesting, but research has shown that just by looking at images that challenge your own stereotypes, such as a pregnant mother working in a warehouse with a hard hat, or a little boy in his ballet outfit, or an old man that is obviously stronger than I was at 18, all of these images immediately sort of throw a wrench into your stereotypes, like, because you're seeing it, there's the visual, there's the immediate association, and re-challenging and reframing of some of these stereotypes that you might have. And finally, the most important thing that you can do as a volunteer is that every time that you interact with a client, see them as an individual, see them and stay in curiosity to find out who they are, versus making quick assumptions based on what they are. So that is just an incredibly easy thing to think about every time you interact with a client. Who are they? What do they believe? What do they need? How can I serve them? What brought them here today? Without making assumptions to the answers of all of those questions. So we're going to end just by sharing with you an inclusion mantra. And Alejandra, would you like to read some part of it? You're on mute.
I had saved it, but we thought it was going to be a fantastic way to end the session, and I'm amazed at how good we are with time. So with this mantra for inclusion. Each of us.
Oops. We lost Alejandra for a little bit. I think she might come back.
Yeah, she froze.
Well, the important thing is here again, each of us has the power to make others feel that they are enough, that they are an individual, that they belong, that they are normal, special, and safe. And Alejandra, I see you came back. So you want to read the second part of?
Sure. Let's explore the beauty, the diversity of the human experience and wholeheartedly exclaim to each other, I see you for who you are, what you bring, where you've been, and where you are from. All of you is perfect just the way you are. And this is by Dr. Tiffany Jana, and her book is Small Acts of Exclusion. And that's how she ends her book too, and that we would like to end this session. But we have time. That's us, and we would love to open the conversation, questions, and I would love to hear from you. Questions, comments, ideas. What is showing up for you now? What is coming up for you? So we would love to have some conversation now. Anyone?
Well, let me ask a question. If anybody wants to answer, what was the most surprising thing that you learned today? You can either answer on the chat.
I liked the table exercise with the table image, because that really made me think, like, even with the new information, I still was stuck to my rigid thinking that those tables were different sizes, and surprised that they were the same size. And like, almost like a magic trick, would have to watch it again and again to be convinced otherwise. And so I think that I could apply that to my thinking about stereotypes and being rigid in my thoughts and behavior.
Very true.
Yeah, I really appreciate going into the psychology behind biases, and just how much of how important it is to do an audit of the media that we consume and the voices that we listen to. I did this practice just simply going through my Instagram feed last year and just looking at who I followed, and being really intentional about really diversifying the accounts that I followed, and like the voices I heard, and like who was represented, and just like how much that's really shifted for me. So I think that just a constant reminder of how ourselves.
And more about like, who are you, not just who are you including, but who are you excluding?
Exactly.
And we talk a lot about that at work.
And doing that exercise with Instagram is a little bit like the pictures, right? You are, by seeing who you are following and then including others that you didn't see before, you're challenging your beliefs, your assumptions, your way of thinking, and expanding them and becoming more aware of what it was that you were keeping outside of your conceptual field.
And so in our daily practices, when we're working with clients, I have a background in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We work at this nonprofit. We're not perfect. I'm always learning, trying to make space to learn. But what do you do when the intent and the impact don't match? How can we, as people that are interacting with the women we serve, if the impact is different than what our intent, how can we make that right?
That is such a great question, Candy. And I've experienced that myself. And I think that the first thing is to acknowledge the impact. And the second thing is to request if the person would be willing to have a conversation about it. not just assume that the person will be willing to educate us. We assume the responsibility for our own education. And then I would say the third part is the reflection after you've been able to make the amends that the client allows you to, because sometimes they will not be open after they were negatively impacted, having further conversation. And you need to be okay with that and respectfully walk away and allow them that space. But if they do, and you have a conversation and they share with you their point of view or how it was that it impacted them, then go back and acknowledging that your aperture of knowledge has expanded. See where else do you think that you might be having a negative impact? Because you might notice in one situation, but that might have other ramifications where you are still having a blind spot. So just having a little bit more of reflection. That would be my take. Alejandra, do you have anything to add?
Agree with that. And sometimes there's not a need to over apologize or anything. There's not any like, because we, by having that reaction, it's also kind of make, okay, well, you might create more damage than trying to fix it. So it's just a matter of like when I said, okay, acknowledge it, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that that was not the right thing to say or to do or to infer or whatever, right? If you would mind, can you please explain to me more? And if not, that's okay. But if yes, say yes to the opportunity, right? So it's always, and it's also important to remember that we all are in different learning pathways, right? They are people, and some of my clients are like, they are just learning about the benefits of diversity. Like, why do we have to have diverse thinking in a group? Why do we have to make sure that we hire a diverse group of employees? I mean, that is the first level, right? And then you can go all the way to try to heal racial tensions in the country. So it's a long pathway of different levels. So everyone is at a different level. So that's also good to keep in mind, where is it where we are and what do we do? And the other thing to keep in mind is that we are all leaders. I mean, regardless of what we do, we are all leaders in our community, and we all have that possibility of have impact, right? To have a good, to influence a community for the good, for the better. So it's always also important to keep in mind, regardless of where we are in that learning pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that my default is always to like over apologize. And then what I've learned is that then you're creating almost like emotional labor for the other person to forgive you, you know, until I get the desired result where they say, I accept your apology or I understand or whatever. And that's not, it's something that I'm always working on, because I like to be liked.
And it happens a lot. I mean, there are a lot of things that we say that or do or think, or that it happens, right? It's more likely that it's going to happen than it's not going to happen, especially when we have people from different cultures working together, right, in contact. But we have to be prepared, or try not to do it, right? Think about the impact. How is that going to look, sound? And then, and if it happens, how we're going to react about that, right? But and we're all learning everything. We're all learning.
And I do want to be respectful of people's times. I know we're a little bit over, but I wanted to say thank you, Candy and Dress for Success, for allowing me and Alejandra to come and share a little bit of what we have learned with you tonight. And like Alejandra said, you're all leaders, and you are all on that journey. Showing up here tonight and spending an hour of your evening definitely shows your commitment. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Alejandra and Venus, and thank you, volunteers.
Yeah. And if there are any questions later, you have your emails there, and we are there to help in any way we can.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye.